It's really fascinating where she uses like basic
Hello. Goodness, that was very loud. Hello. How are you? Good. I'm getting over a cold, which is why you'll get some kind of very white notes in every now and again. Hi, my name is Kenneth. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the curator and host of Poetry at the Point. I'm really glad you're here. It's always a thrill when people actually show up in person and trudge all the way out to a live poetry reading. So thanks for making it out. Very grateful to you who are showing up on the internet. Glad you're here, whether it's today the 28th. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Whether it's on November 28th or in the future, please share, comment. We want to keep some momentum going for these poets and for this year's St. Louis Poetry Center. Really excited to be with you this evening. Tonight is a special kind of format that we did a couple years ago, and then for some strange reason didn't do it last year, but a few months ago, Ben reached out to me, Ben Gaa, and said, hey, remember that thing you did a couple years ago? We should try that again with the writing group I'm with. And I was like, done, no problem. So he has brought a few of his compadres in the Mississippi Mud Daubers, which is a writing group who meets periodically. I'm going to read more about them in a moment, but I'm really excited for them to read and then to be in conversation with them. So very excited. So the usual shout outs to the members of the St. Louis Poetry Center. You can become a member at the website, stlouispoetrycenter.org. Please check that out. Always want to shout out Missouri Arts Council and the Regional Arts Commission, aka MAC and RAC. Whose generous support makes this series possible each year. Thank you, as always, to the Focal Point, who keep the lights on and keep this place lovely and warm and cozy in here. By the way, I turned the thermostat up higher than I might at my house, just as like a luxury to me. So like if it feels too warm, let me know. I can totally turn it down. My wife would tell you I keep it freezing. I hope she's not watching. Speaking of which, before I forget, logistically, if you need to use the restroom, you will go out. You can either go out that door or you can kind of go through there into the lit hallway. You will see on your left a couple of restrooms. They don't have doors. On the right is a women's restroom. It does have a door. And to our understanding at this moment, all three toilets actually operate. Okay? So for the purposes of this evening, the women's restroom is now all gender. Okay? If that's too weird for you, I've received word that Saratoga Lanes is cool with us using the restrooms over there. So you could get nice and freshly chilly and go to Saratoga Lanes and use that too if for some reason that doesn't work. Okay? Fun and games in a small nonprofit poetry reading. Okay, I have a few other events to announce to you. First of all, I just want you to know that, so I've been meeting with other curators of some of our other programming. We're going to start to kind of stagger our programming a bit next year to kind of draw focus each month to a smaller amount of things and do fewer things well instead of a whole lot of things pretty well, right? So for Poetry at the Point next year, that'll mean taking a summer break. So we'll go, don't quote me on this, it'll be on the website, January through April, and we're going to take a summer break, and then I'll come back in August and October. And then in 2025, we'll kind of start to go every other month. So that'll just give us time to really kind of create thematic, if you will, readings like the one we have tonight. Give us time to kind of advertise some more. So just keep your eyes on our website and on Facebook and Instagram for that. We're also going to be hosting a Member Appreciation Winter Happy Hour on Tuesday, December 12th from 5 to 7 right here at the Focal Point. So I hope you can join us for hot cocoa, good company, and to meet some of our new volunteers and interns and help us celebrate you, our members, who help make all this stuff possible. So again, keep your eyes on social media for that. And again, stlouispoetrycenter.org for all this stuff. I've already mentioned housekeeping about the restrooms. Another bit of housekeeping is that back in the corner, a couple of our poets this evening do have books for sale. So please go see them and buy that stuff and support local poetry with your hard-earned cash. I mentioned the folks who are visiting us on Al Gore's internet. I did mention that tonight's format is a little different. So I'm going to introduce the group. I'll introduce Ben, And then Ben will introduce kind of each poet in turn, and then at the end, kind of when they're ready for me, I'll come back up and close this in some conversation. As they do that, as those questions pop into your brain that you'd like us to wrestle with, please let us know. Please jot those down because we want you to be able to be involved in this in that way. Okay? All right. Poetry time. The Mississippi Mud Daubers Haiku group was formed in 2006 by John, Dumpy, and named by the late Gretchen Batts. The group of 6 to 10 members meets once a quarter at 222 Artisan Bakery in Edwardsville, Illinois. Meetings consist of critique of each other's work, the celebration of each other's successes, and general fellowship among like-minded poets. Love that. Specifically, Ben Gaa is your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. That's all in caps, by the way. Bad. And host of Haiku Talk on YouTube. He's the author of 2 full-length collections of haiku, and Centerview One Breath from Spartan Press in 2020, and the Touchstone Award-winning Wishbones from Folded Word in 2018, as well as 4 chapbooks, the Haiku Award, it's a pun, One Note Moon, Fiddle in the Floorboards, Blowing on a Hot Soup Spoon, and the Pushcart-nominated Wasp Shadows. With over 1,000 haiku and Centerview published in journals and anthologies around the globe, he enjoys both giving and attending poetry readings and workshops and being part of the literary conversation, just like this one. Ben, please.
Thank you very much. It's good to see so many nice faces out and about in the real world. I see some more people have come in since I took my position up front here, so good to see you. Thanks for coming out. And thank you again, St. Louis Poetry Center, for having 4 haiku poets read this in one event. Usually, if I'm in the reading series, it's just me, and they have to do a lot of explaining, and then it gets to read. But now I'll get to do a little bit of explaining up front, so none of you have to. None of them just have to. The one thing I will say up front is that we are contemporary writers, which means that the template that you're all taught in school of a 3-line poem where you count syllables of 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, that has kind of got thrown away a little bit for people that do this seriously outside of Japan. If you want to know more about that, that's a good Q&A question because we can talk your ears off about that, and we all have good answers. But the main reason why I bring this up is because I don't want to see anybody out there counting syllables on their fingers as poets read their work. Seriously, people do this. And if you don't give them a heads up, they are very confused and disoriented and think, you were reading haiku, but you didn't, the math didn't add up. So please put your syllable counters in your pockets. Sit back, enjoy the moments. They are moments that have captured, and hopefully you'll be able to find yourselves in some of the poems you hear tonight. All of these readers are writing at a very high level. All of them globally published, locally, regionally, globally published, and we're all very active within the haiku community, as you'll see when we have the bios. We're going to start off with Allyson Whipple, who generally doesn't go first with a W last name. So we're going to reverse order tonight. Allyson Whipple, Bryan Rickert, John J, and myself. And Allyson, apart from being a really good car ride companion to haiku conferences, is the creator of the Culinary Sajiki blog and podcast, and the Haiku Girl Summer. She also serves as the newsletter editor and Midwest Regional Coordinator for the Haiku Society of America. And before moving to St. Louis, Allyson was active in the Texas poetry community, serving as board president of Borderlands, Texas Poetry Review, as well as co-editor for 4 editions of the Texas Poetry Calendar. She is now a proud resident of the Soulard neighborhood. Please put your hands together for Allyson Whipple.
All right, this is my first Missouri reading. This is amazing. I've been here a little over a year, and this is wonderful. So this is my first haiku collection. It's my 3rd poetry chapbook. First one, all haiku. I used to be, a mainstream poet, and then I got an MFA, and that just destroyed me. So then I started writing haiku, because when you've been forced to write 3-page poems for 3 years, you then write 3-line poems indefinitely. And so I have a bunch of copies. This just came out a month ago, and I did live in Texas for 15 years. This is called Postcards from Texas. If you want to know why, that is a great question for the Q&A. I will say it roughly documents my final year living in Texas, which is a place that still is near and dear to my heart. I miss it just about every day, and also it's a pretty fraught place to live. Also, Ben, I'm going to read every haiku twice. We didn't discuss this beforehand. I like to read them twice because they're so short. Sometimes, but other poets might not do that. Cicada song all gone. One air conditioner still drones before dawn. Cicada song all gone. One air conditioner still drones before dawn. First cold morning, every dog a puppy again. First cold morning, every dog a puppy again. Cigarette drag, last gasp of wildflowers in November wind. Cigarette drag, last gasp of wildflowers in November wind. I don't want to read the whole book, but I'm like, oh, I love all of these. Which is probably good. You should probably like all these poems. Equinox, the first mosquito sighting of spring. Equinox, the first mosquito sighting of spring. First bluebonnets, gunshot trauma kit in my school bag. First bluebonnets, gunshot trauma kit in my school bag. For sale sign gone. Around the demolition notice, rain lilies. For sale sign gone. Around the demolition notice, rain lilies. Rent increase. Even the sparrows have moved on. Rent increase. Even the sparrows have moved on. Giving notice. The first dandelions gone to seed. Giving notice. The first dandelions gone to seed. Do people know what grackles are in Missouri? Okay, good. I haven't seen one since I've been here. I haven't seen one. I don't know. Look, I haven't. If you don't know, a grackle is like a punk rock crow. Spring thunder. One grackle call before the storm. Spring thunder. One grackle call before the storm. Feral beehive. The whole earth humming beneath our feet. Feral beehive. The whole earth humming beneath our feet. Where the prickly pear became compost, sunflowers. Where the prickly pear became compost, sunflowers. Pulling sticker burrs from pant legs, one by one. Pulling sticker burrs from pant legs, one by one. A sparrow carcass almost picked clean, heat advisory. A sparrow carcass almost picked clean, heat advisory. Skyline Trail, our last beer already warm. Skyline Trail, our last beer already warm. Heat shimmer, in an unmowed lawn, grass going to seed. Heat shimmer, in an unmowed lawn, grass going to seed. Wild roses, all the names I do not know. Wild roses, all the names I do not know. Like that, all right, I'm about halfway through. I'm going to read a haibun. If you don't know, a haibun is another Japanese form of poetry that is a prose poem with a haiku at the end of it. There are many variations. Again, if you would like to know more, that is a great question for the Q&A. That is the wrong haibun. This is the last poem I wrote when I lived in Texas. It takes place on the Texas Gulf Coast. And then hopefully I'll have time to read a few Missouri haiku for you. A beach is no place for a grave. My dog and I meander down the sand, water surrounding our ankles. The wind has pummeled us for 2 days, but at least it's cool. A mile from the hotel, I debate walking farther, not knowing if I will ever set foot on this beach again. A red-haired woman is walking in my direction. She stops, bends down to inspect a lump on the sand. By its size, a sanderling. By her expression, dead. She tries to guide it with her foot toward the rising tide. No shovel, not even a decent piece of driftwood to try digging a hole. And even if she could, children toss up the sand all day and coyotes scavenge down the shoreline at night. But every time her toes push the tiny bird corpse into the water, the waves push it back to shore. The sanderling is freshly dead. I see a streak of blood in the water. Ready to offer assistance, I realize my dog is too interested. And the last thing I need is for her instinct to kick in and make an even bigger mess. I turn us back toward the hotel, and tears form in my eyes out of sympathy for this woman trying to do the right thing and out of guilt that I cannot help. So I let myself imagine her finding the right wave, that the Gulf finally carries the dead sanderling out to the depths, that the strong undertows send the corpse to oblivion, that the blood staining the water fades in the noon sun. I tell myself that this is how the story ends. On the cusp of hurricane season, oil rigs in the distance. All right, just a few new pieces. Bourbon's last gasp at the back of my throat. What's left unsaid. Bourbon's last gasp at the back of my throat. What's left unsaid. Summer dusk, the dachshund fighting a firefly. Summer dusk, the dachshund fighting a firefly. Hook caught in the fish. My nephew asks if it hurts. Hook caught in the fish. My nephew asks if it hurts. Slow apocalypse, knowing each monarch sighting could be my last. Slow apocalypse, knowing each monarch sighting could be my last. Thank you.
Let this be first of many readings here in Missouri. Next up, we have Bryan Rickert. And apart from also liking poutine and stag beer and living in my hometown of Belleville, we have this in common as well, a love of haiku. Bryan Rickert is the current president of the Haiku Society of America and has been published in many fine journals. He's the co-editor of Failed Haiku Journal, which is a Senru journal, and edits the Living Center Anthology. What is Senru? Good question for the Q&A session afterwards, unless Bryan wants to say a bit before he starts reading. Bryan has 2 books, one of which is for sale in the back, called Fish Kite, and Dust and Stone, which he co-wrote with Peter Jastrzemski. And his work has also been selected for inclusion in A New Residence, Volume 12. So, it's my great honor to bring to the stage fellow Belleville men, Bryan Rickert.
thank you everybody for coming out. I will not be reading my poems twice, as is customary for some haiku and tenru poets. I always joke, because I was a teacher for 15 years, that that kind of evokes laziness, that you can sleep through the first one and catch it on the rewind. So you just have to pay attention the first go around. All right, and then I will end with some haibon as well. Okay. Funeral home. The peonies falling apart. Reading of the will. I inherit the anxiety. Cleaning father's closet. The shoes I still can't fill. Cicada shells. What to do with the urn. Visiting the place I put your ashes. Dogwoods in bloom. Blossom viewing. A garden full of selfies. Country mile. The distance it takes to make a bouquet. Knowing all the back roads, thistle down. Prairie restoration, 100 miles of lark song. Controlled burn, the scars they said would heal. Alone again, the ragged edge of the half moon. Death anniversary, watering the plant that never blooms. Winter doldrums, parking in someone else's ruts. Snowmelt, the things I've learned about moving on. Spring gales, the runaway kite I've become. Home late, the look I get from the cat. First confession, my child takes the longest. True story on that one. Hopefully you're not watching. Daughter's laundry. Pieces of I love you in the lint trap. Garden weeds. Questioning my neighbor's long-term interests. Telling it like it is, crackle chatter. Open range, the unbridled horsetail clouds. Wildflower field, a butterfly chooses me. Stopping to rest, the stream keeps going. Along the bank, following the heron, following the fish. River gar, what little I know of the deep. Talking religion, the slipperiness of mossy stones. Autumn turns the firm grip of cockleburs. Shoeless night, finding every acorn. Fingers numbed in the woodland stream. First columbine. Night of stars, the feel of her hand through the mitten. And for my short haiku, I won't drag you through a lot of prose tonight. Two of them. First one, lifelines. When you give birth to a baby that you know is going to die, an entire lifetime is measured in moments. The one time she grasps your hand will be a lifetime of hand-holding. And when she's gone, nothing but moments and dreams remain. Wet snow, our useless attempt to hang on. We'll end on a happier note. Saturday ritual. Here's how it works. The old man is too proud to ask for help. Things always need to be done around the place. So while I mow the lawn, he starts a project we both know he can't finish. Today it's scraping and painting the old wooden barn doors. Grass mowed, tractor cleaned and put away, I pick up an old putty knife and start scraping. He doesn't need to ask, and I don't need to be told. Late day sun, the beer cooler full of stories. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we've got John J. Who I've known the longest of the readers up here, and he was the one that invited me to join the Mississippi Mud Daubers. We actually met at a reading series back at the old Duff's restaurant, if some of the people remember that. I think the reading series was probably, I think it was Chance Operations, where they did a night of short poems. And I was really excited because when I switched from writing free verse to haiku and I started reading that around town, people were like, oh, have you met John? Have you met John? He was like the only other guy that everyone knew that wrote in this form. And so it was really great that we got to read together at a reading. And afterwards, we immediately found each other, chatted, and became fast friends, and still meet once a month, online or in person, to share work. And so it's an honor to get to introduce you tonight, John. John J. is Professor of English and Creative Writing and Associate Dean of Humanities and Theology at Missouri Baptist University in Creve Coeur. He's the author, translator, editor, and co-editor of 33 books, including 11 poetry collections. He has also published more than 2,300 poems in some of the finest journals around, such as in this genre, such as Modern Haiku, Frog Pond, Wales Haiku Journal, and many others. And he has served as the editor of Dawn Returns, the Haiku Society of America's member anthology in 2022. So you can see we have, like I said, we're very active in this community with the Mississippi Mud Daubers in the greater haiku community. We have board members and people volunteering for the Haiku Society of America, which is kind of a cool organization. It's been around for a long time. It does a lot of good work to promote this stuff. And so, please welcome John J.
Thank you, Ben. Very nice introduction. I'm learning how to write haiku from Ben now, so he's my master. I'm going to read the 20 seasonal haiku, 5 poems for each season, and then with 15 semi poems. Spring. These are all standalone poems. Spring. Melting snow, the feather of a wild goose left behind. Spring afternoon, bike wheels on the tailgate spin themselves. The next one is a two-line haiku. Playing the green frog, her springtime eyes. Spring yard work, my dog with a ball in his mouth. Spring night, puppy's belly rises and falls. And summer, lawn mowing, the machine pauses at wild violets. Mowing grass, someone touches me, a birch limb. A trout eclipse, summer moon. Summer breeze, a baby turtle peeks out of its shell. Homecoming, crossing the creek with shoes in my hand. Autumn, autumn leaves, mastering the art of hair pulling. Night outing with my aging dog, maple-colored moon. Autumn leaves, my paintbrush drips red. Autumn evening, the grasshopper's long jump into silence. Not alone on this autumn trail, box turtle. And then winter. First snow, all viewers have left except the moon and me. Snowy trail, shoe prints of different patterns. Ornamental grasses, frozen in one direction, winter wind. Short day, I put my thinning hair in its place. Nursing home, a faded leaf stuck on the fence. Now, these are semi-poems, satiric, humorous, sarcastic poems about human nature, or the foibles and failures of humans. Only because the in-laws are coming, spring cleaning. Setting up a trap with a prayer for mice to flee. My doctor asks if my tongue is sore. Now it is. Half asleep, awakened by my own chuckle. First summer break, the professor's parents take her to Disneyland. This is what happened to a young professor in my department. So. Tailgating while listening to hymns. The driver ahead swerves. I do too, for no reason. I write a lot of high-selling poems while I drive. And the next one is a one-line poem. Aloof neighbor, a vine from his yard reaches into mine. Young and good-looking, the thieves in a porch piracy video. Karma, the porch pirate sprains her ankle. These poems are based on YouTube. Okay? Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've watched thousands of YouTube videos. Okay? There are many funny videos. Pandemic thinking. United we fall, divided we stand. Out of lockdown, after watching countless Three Stooges clips. Post-lockdown barbecue. Senior friends update their ailments. I have lots of old friends who are in the 70s and 80s. I'm not there yet. 65, measuring out my life with dental implants. If you don't have a dental implant, you're still very young. I'm 67 now. So. Okay, the last one, YouTube, socialist music interspersed with capitalist ads. Thank you.
Okay, well, I've already had my bio read, so I'm Ben Gaa, just once again. And I do my readings a little different. I do read them with these chimes. And so, the way it'll work is I will ring the chimes 3 times to start my reading. I'm going to do a poem chime, poem chime, poem chime, until I get to that last poem, at which point I will ring the chimes 3 times, which will be your cue that my reading is over, and your cue to come up to the stage to we'll start the Q&A. So, without further ado, if you have a tasty beverage, sit back, relax, and let's haiku. Daybreak. Blueberries purple the pancakes. Sunrise. Cream coloring the coffee, coloring the cream. It's always morning somewhere. Cinnamon rolls. Weekday morning. Pulling my mood off a hanger. Morning fog. The suddenness of deer. Holding our breath, the heron eyes a fish. Cold snap, the fir tree collecting maple leaves. Autumn chill, a rustle of leaves in my chest. Autumn wind, the neighbor's tree becoming ours. Winding to where the river used to be, Grandpa's story. The world as he saw it, Grandpa's globe. Grandpa's Bible, the verses he underlined, the verses he didn't. Glasses full and about. Grandpa's pocket knife, the faint scent of sassafras. Driftwood. I, too, am passing through this river town. arrowhead, the possibility of past lives. Midlife, relearning the shape of my shadow. Fart. The cat and I exchange glances. Popping up behind the book, cat ears. The record spinning the room, spinning the record. The cat warming my lap, warming the cat. Flat earth, the way she spins her truth. One white lie becomes two. Riptide. Unfolding a map, the ocean between us. Adrift in your sea, my 3 octopus hearts. Moonrise, the river running through it. River moon, the slow bend of the blues. Whiskey moon, the piper wets his whistle. Wanting, not wanting this day to end. Hospice room. Perseids. So many chances to start again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh no.
But I got a joke. Check, check. All right, so I'm gonna have lots of questions. I hope you do too. I'm gonna start us off with a question or two, but I really want to turn it over to you. They kind of like baited us a little bit with stuff they want us to ask them. So yeah, as you have those, please let me know. But I just want to start and ask anybody who wants to bite on the first one, which is, how did you come to this form? I mean, I know at least for a white boy growing up in Middle Tennessee, it was in my 5th grade, textbook, 575 stuff, and that was kind of it. So I'd love to kind of hear from anybody just how you came to this form, and then how you kind of, maybe the extra question is, how you decided to really commit yourself to this particular form out of all the choices.
So I also learned the whole 5-7-5 thing. And then at one point, I went to a haiku workshop at the Austin Zen Center, which cracked open a lot of things for me. But then I was very busy, like getting a divorce and getting an MFA. And apparently, once in the summer of 2015, I ran a haiku study group as a private Facebook group that I have no memory of doing. But one of my friends said that that's how she got into haiku, and I'm like, I don't even remember that I did that, but I probably did. I guess I did. And then I had a really bad haiku unit in my MFA program one summer. I'm like, oh, and I mean, he was a great poet, but he was not a poet that actually studied haiku in a meaningful way, and that galvanized me a little bit. And then, like I said, I had to spend 3 years writing 3-page poems, and I couldn't do that anymore. And then COVID happened, and I couldn't think very well. I didn't get COVID until like this past summer. I just, there was a lot going on. And the whole 3-line to 1-line, very short poem was a very digestible way to read and think and write. And that's when I really just went all in.
Like a lot of teenagers, there was a lot of angst and poetry reading in my past. And then I went on to visual arts school and became an art teacher for 15 years and gave up on the poetry thing. But an extremely good friend of mine, Stephen Coretta, kept writing poetry, and he was writing haiku while I was taking photos and making drawings and whatnot. So I had that exposure through his beautiful work. And then you have a wife and children and 955 kids at your school that you teach. And you realize you don't have time to draw and paint and take pictures and do darkroom work. And so something clicked one day when I was I have a Japanese garden at my house, and snow was falling on the bamboo and bending it. And then I kind of wrote this little thing about how snow finished my landscape for me. Like, the gardener's work is never done, but the snow came and I was like, oh, now it's right. So I wrote this little thing out and told my friend Steve, and he's like, dude, you wrote a haiku. And I was like, I don't need paintbrushes to do this, and I don't need an insane amount of art materials or to kiln clay. So, boom, I've always been a hard worker, and from that moment, I started working hard at this one thing.
Thank you. I began to write haiku around 2002. I was a new professor at Missouri Baptist, and I was teaching word literary types, which is a general education course. And we were using a book that is not really for word literature, the Norton Introduction to Literature. And it had a section on Macho Basho's haiku, 3 or 4 poems, and they really appealed to me. I grew up in South Korea, lived there for 31 years. And those poems spoke to me. Japanese haiku poems are much simpler than American haiku written these days. They are simpler, less complicated, less confusing. Okay? They spoke to me, so I began to write haiku, and they were rejected by modern haiku. One of the best, Lee Gerda was the editor. I hope he doesn't remember this, but he would terrible poems. Okay. So I made it competitive and I began to learn. So I attended a lot of workshops and read some books. I got better and better. And I had studied literature in order to get a master's, PhD, and then I thought, okay, why should I study somebody's poetry all the time? I don't want to do it. I want to write my own poems. And I wanted to become a poet, not a novelist or a playwright. Poet sounds much more romantic than, other titles. So what's the best way to become a poet? Write a 3-line haiku and claim to be a poet. So, thank you.
Great answers. I got a long answer, but I'm going to give a more abbreviated answer. I guess I got first introduced. I've been writing poetry most of my life, and went to Knox College to get a degree in creative writing, focusing on poetry and playwriting. And when I was there, my professor, I was writing a bunch of longer, weird stuff, and started doing some short works. And she studied under Robert Haas, and he had a translation of the haiku masters, Busan, Basho, and Issa. And she said, "Read this. I don't know what to do with you, but there's this guy who taught me, and you should." This is right before he became the poet laureate, so it was kind of a cool thing. I was blown away. It was the first time I was introduced to haiku that wasn't 575, and it was amazing how clear and easy, not easy to understand, but I could read it, and it was inviting, and it just kind of blew me away. This is 300-year-old poems that were from another culture that are breathing life today. So I started writing my own, and then it kind of went dormant for a while, and then I was writing plays and all sorts of poems and stuff, and I got to a point where I was trying to do a lot of different things at once. And I realized I'm having some luck with playwriting, but I don't consider myself a playwright. I always consider myself a poet first, maybe for romantic reasons, I don't know, as John was saying. But I decided I'm going to just focus on poetry. And in doing so, I started submitting poems out, and I saw haiku journals, The Heron's Nest and Acorn, and I submitted. I dusted some stuff off from college, a little cocky, like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I think I can do this. And I got a really terse rejection letter from an editor at The Heron's Nest from a poet, now deceased Peggy Lyles. And she really laid into me, like saying, you do not know what you're doing, do not submit anything anywhere to any journal until you figure this out. I'm not gonna tell you what you did wrong, I'm gonna give you a reading list and try again. And so at some point in my life, I was at the right place to actually hear this. And so I heard it, and I just read it, and I submitted it again, and she said, nope, you're not there, but I can tell you read it. Read this. So we went around a couple more times before I did get something accepted. And at that point, I was hooked. Like, there's no going back to anything else. And I only write haiku and senryu. Like, these guys write all sorts of other forms. No. I'm focused on this because I want to get really good at one thing. And to do that, it's like I'm still learning so much. I mean, I started doing this for real, I would say, in 2009. And I've had a lot of successes. My 6th book is for sale back there. And I'm still learning so much every time I pick up a journal. And so it's not over for me at all. And I really like that continued practice, that continued refinement, that continued focus on one thing. And the other thing about haiku is that, unlike other forms of writing, at least for me, I can say, is that you don't write about your personal life to the detail where it's about you. And I have to think, I'm going to write a series about my mom, or I'm going to write a series about this. You have this concept ideas. It's just they come to you. I sit down, I be still, I get into the mode of haiku writing, and then moments come to me. I never think about what I'm going to write. And that's something that I had a hard time with writing longer free verse. And because it's so short, you have to pay attention to everything you're doing. So you really have to focus. And I found I can focus on a very small thing really well. But if it's a 20-line poem, I might have great sounds, but I have no idea. I get lost. So the brevity of it is really what part of what keeps me there.
I appreciate that. Well, I'll toss it out to you. And again, I got lots of stuff I can ask, but are there any questions that you have that you would like to kick off with? Yes. Oh, hi. How are you?
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I was wondering, do any of you do zazen? And is there any relationship to haiku and zen?
And then Zen, is that what you said?
Right,
Zazen.
zazen and zen.
Zazen and Zen. Okay. Any relations between haiku and Zen? We're talking like the sort of philosophical approach to things, or are we talking about a particular?
Zazen is the practice of zen.
Got it.
Haiku is a traditional Japanese poetic form, and it became a respectable form in the 1600s, and it shows a huge influence of Buddhism especially Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism began in China, and then Zen is called Chan in Chinese, Sun in Korean, and then Zen in Japanese. So you can find a lot of elements of Buddhist thinking in haiku poems about human suffering. Human suffering, the fleeting nature of human life, that kind of thing. So you can still detect those elements in Western haiku these days. But even though Western haiku have become much more diversified, you can find some influences of the Western poetic tradition like metaphysical poetry. Some haiku poems are really hard to understand. That's what my non-haiku poet friends say. They don't understand what the poems are saying. They're very sophisticated poems, but intellectualized to me. So, yes.
I think that historically, when you talk about the development of Japanese literature from China into modern day, its development parallels the development of the Buddhist culture and how it interweaves with the more native Shinto belief system and how they are compatible. So I think that a lot of Westerners have a very interesting idea of what Zen is from our somewhat uneducated mind about those things. We kind of snowball what Zen is, and it could be considered a little bit culturally inappropriate to those people who actually are Zen Buddhists. So I hate to say that haiku is entrenched in Zen, but because it comes from a culture that developed in parallel, then you're going to have that relationship, because the same people that were developing Zen practice through hundreds of years were also developing their parallel literature practice, and as it transformed through its many stages. So for us to sit here in this culture and say that there is a relationship between that kind of neglects hundreds of years worth of development over a long period of time.
Great question.
May I add something?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So in haiku, we need to capture a haiku moment, a moment of enlightenment, sudden enlightenment. That's what happens in Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism does not believe in reading thousands of Buddhist scriptures, sutras. Okay? You can reach enlightenment, just very quickly. Okay? Yeah, satori. And we reach enlightenment without having lengthy prosaic conversations. Something triggers and then you reach enlightenment. That's what Zen Buddhism is. It's like a haiku.
Yeah, so I guess that none of us here are practicing Buddhists and practicing Zen people, but I would say that because a haiku it captures a moment, and that moment unfolds in the present tense. So they're not poems about the future, they're not poems about the past, they're poems about now. And I think that's the link that kind of speaks well to like a Zen moment, to where you're living in the now, living in the present, or like an eternal now. I think, gosh, I can't think of the guy's name. Tom. Anyway, it's been talked about in a lot of circles about that relationship there. But you don't have to be a Zen practitioner to write haiku, but you can be a Zen practitioner and write haiku. But none of us up here are Zen practitioners in the strict sense.
Great question. Awesome question. Others? Yeah, go for it.
I'll ask the question. Can you talk a little bit about the maybe historical or reason behind the Western diversion from the 575?
Thank you. You turned us all into 575 haters. So now you got to own up to it. And all right.
I think that first we have to understand that the Japanese people don't speak English. And so yeah, no, I mean that sounds really silly, and I have a way of making fun of things. But yeah, so It is a non-Romance language, so everything that we study and everything we know about language does not necessarily apply to their system. We count beats in syllables, right? And that's how we think about language. The Japanese do not count syllables, they count ons or onji, which is sound units, which is extremely different than English. So when you say that you should do 575 syllables, you're measuring yourself against the wrong ruler because they don't even use syllables.
So what's the difference between a sound unit and a phoneme?
A sound unit,
It's
see,
like imperial and metric. It's like
Right.
you're trying to write in
Each,
metric.
each consonant in Japanese is followed by a vowel sound. So if you use 17 syllables,
oh yeah,
I'm sorry.
no,
If you have 7 syllables in English, your poem will sound very, very wordy. You typically use about 3 or 4 prepositions like on, by, at, which makes the poem sound, sound very cluttered. Okay, so Christmas has 5 sound units in Japanese, only 2 syllables in English. So they don't have the concept of syllables in Japanese.
and also the English is more syllabically dense in regards to the fact that we can say more with fewer sounds than the Japanese language, which has a more rhythmic stance to it. You know that English does not necessarily have as much of a rhythmic stance because our language is extremely chopped with other languages. And you can speak one sentence in English, and that one sentence can draw from any number of languages. And in Japanese, it is Japanese. So when you have a language that is more syllabically loose, you're going to need more 575. I have a good friend who speaks German, and they say, we make new words by combining old words. There's no way you can write German 575. It's a big language. So the rhythm is important, the cadence is important, but counting on your fingers, even in Japan a lot of times, is not the most important thing. I think the one thing that American educators, as a former educator, we always get wrong is the fact that there is an entire philosophy, hundreds of years old, of what makes a haiku, but in 3rd grade, we just learned about syllables. We didn't learn about the koriji, we didn't learn about the kigo, we didn't learn about seasonality, sajikis, all these different things are what make a haiku. But getting the American education system to get authentic about non-Western things is a challenge.
And along with that, I think 2 things are important to keep in mind. Also, a lot of what we've gotten in the West all comes from Shiki's perspective on haiku. So there were the 3 real old masters, Basho, Busan, Issa, and then there was Shiki, who was early 20th century, very influential, but just a lot of his perspective is what made it to the United States. And it's also, I think, important to keep in mind that so many of us writing in the United States, we are getting all of this in translation, whether it's the poems themselves or if it's someone else's thoughts on poetics. So much of it is filtered through translation. And I'm glad we have it, but there's always the lens of the translator that's coming into it, and I think that's something that's always worth remembering.
I knew we all had ideas about how to answer this question. The way that I look at the question is that in the early 20th century, well, late 1800s, Japan started opening itself up to the world. It was an isolationist country prior to that for many years. When that happened, everybody from the West rushed in to study what this culture is and what it does. Among that were linguists, people looking at the literature, figuring out what it does. And they saw this form of haiku, which is written maybe in 17 onji, and they're seeing this form, and they're like, well, how do we translate this into English? And so there are a lot of really interesting early translations of haiku that you can find out there that were very flowery, very, very romantic sounding. Others were other different, but it kind of settled on this 3-line form with the 17 syllables to try to mimic 17 onji. And they kind of stack it up to try to have the kind of rules of fragment, phrase, and this and that to kind of get it into something that we could palate, that linguist says this is the equivalent of that. And again, they do lose a lot of things in the translation, but that kind of became the standard practice for a long time. And because most people in the West weren't writing this seriously, it took until like in the 50s really, when poets got involved with the translations, that they realized, hey, there's more going on here than just this 575 thing. And so from about 1950s on, you see journals start showing up of people writing this seriously, this form seriously. And they decided, well, we're not going to look at 575 anymore because we know that there's not a good equivalency there. But what else is there? What else makes it a haiku? Some of that stuff's been talked here. It's a poem that takes place in the present tense. It's a moment that unfolds in real time. It's a juxtaposition of images, and so on, so on, so on, so on. And so the poets got involved and invested and took over the form from the linguists and the academics, and that's where we're all from today. We follow that tradition. And it's not to say you can't write a 575, but 575 I think stays in schools just because it's the first lesson that a teacher gets to teach kids about how language is constructed. It's the first thing. It's short. You teach kids how to write syllables. That's basically it. Kids, write a 3-line poem, count your syllables. If you write 5 of these poems, and I can tell you to count your syllables, that's great. Then tomorrow we're going to talk about sonnets. And then you never look back on what a haiku is. It's just a template. You learn syllables. Now we're going to talk about rhyme schemes. We're going to talk about stresses. We're going to talk about other things. And that's another issue that we as poets would have with certain things, is that every form is a form for a reason, beyond just a grammatical rule. There are other things a Shakespearean sonnet does other than rhyming couplets. Most people don't go beyond that and scratch the surface. What you've heard from tonight are 4 poets that take this form of haiku very seriously. We're involved in a global community of poets that are writing in this form and publishing in this form, and are giving talks in this form and readings in this form, and people write essays on this form, because it's more than a template. And judging by some of the reaction that we heard in the audience tonight, it hit home with some people. Some of these poems hit, and that's the reason. It's because they do things that other forms of poetry don't. And so when poets got involved, we see a growth of the form. We see it evolve into something away from a template, and we get it to a root of what the poem's all about. Yes.
So years ago, somebody did research on how many syllables Western haiku poets use on average. The result was 11 syllables altogether, 10 to 12, okay? And in preparation for my haiku talk in Arkansas a few weeks ago, I actually counted syllables on 4 pages of either modern haiku fragment. Actually, it was 11.22. You know, so the haiku speed is much more important than the length.
But it's still short.
There's a lot we could talk about, but I'm going to start to wrap us by going to I'm going to ask my last question of you all, which is, one of the reasons you're here is because you're actually in a group together. So I'd love to kind of close by, and we can just start with you, Ben, and go back around. What benefit is there to being in a group with other folks? I mean, even beyond folks who are writing in the same forms that you are attempting to master, but just the benefits of being in community with other folks who are taking their craft seriously.
Well, partly it's because you can talk shop, you know? Like if you talk about a poem you got submitted or rejected, or you can really get into the nuts and bolts about, what's going on there. Or boy, did you see that latest issue of Frog Pond? And man, what about on page 2? Did you see what Carolyn Hall wrote recently? That's amazing. We can have these conversations with each other that our friends and loved ones out there, it's just not it's not the tip of their tongue, and that's okay. And so it's fun to be around other people, and it's also a support system. It's helps you, keeps you going. You celebrate your strengths, you celebrate your weaknesses, and you're all moving towards the same direction. And it's just you find your tribe. You're around these people, and you're like, I went to my first haiku conference way back when, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all sorts of these people with these little sketchbooks walking around, kind of nervous and like they're me. I'm home. It's great. So I'll end there.
It is almost essential to have creative partners if you want to grow as a poet. And I do not send out poems for publication without showing the same poem to 2 or 3 people, including Ben and Bryan. They are A+ poets. And we have been exchanging, Ben and I exchange poems every month for more than 10 years by now. More than 10 years, about 25 poems. And Bryan and I have been exchanging poems for about 6 or 7 years. Yeah. So it is very helpful. These guys are just pros. They live on haiku, and they're very dedicated. I do all kinds of things. Okay, I wear many hats. I do literary scholarship. I write books, edit books. So in my case, I spend about 3 days and nights every month just wrecking my brain, coming up with 25 poems. But these guys write poems every day. Very inspiring to me. The dedication really inspires me. So.
When I was an art teacher, I used to tell my students that it's a movement, an art movement exists because more than one person's doing it and they found each other. And that one thing leads to another, but more often than not, they didn't work in isolation. And I am very introverted. How I became a teacher is beyond me. But yeah, I'm very introverted by nature. So I never really had a thing until I found these people who were in my art movement. And that's the only parallel I can make to that, is the fact that, this is the art movement that I belong in right now.
I feel like there aren't like a lot of people, like once they get, anyone who wants to like be a poet when they go to college, most of them do not want to be a poet when they leave college. And so poetry gets pretty niche the older you get, and if you write haiku, it gets even nichier. That's a word I made up, but I have an MFA, so I'll have to do that. I went into massive student debt to make up words on the fly. So it is, like, haiku is a really small subset of a relatively small subset of the cultural community of the United States. And so we need each other, We need to know we are not just writing our little 3 lines and hoping they sound okay. We just, it's really all what they said. It gives you community and it gives you a good check on if you're on the right track, and it's good. It's just good to have friends that do the same things that you do.
Well, please, let's begin to close by appreciating these poets. And their work, and their ideas, and their thoughts. So our next reading is not until January, but it's an excellent one. So we're taking a break in December. On January 23rd, we will be featuring Kirby Ewald and Kristen Emanuel, 2 poets I met at Poetry in the Woods this fall, which strongly recommend you Google that on the Googles and get involved with that community that's been really gaining a lot of momentum with the Poetry Center. So it's been a really cool kind of synergy happening. Just a reminder that you'll be able to view tonight's reading on Facebook and on YouTube after tonight. So huge thank you to those checking out this video in the future. Thank you again to the poets. Thank you to Erin Quick, who is home sick with just some throat nastiness that she came in and spent the time and set all this up for us tonight so that this reading could be successful and I could do as little as possible as a volunteer. So thank you to Erin from afar. Thank you to you for showing up live in person to a poetry reading in 2023. I don't take that for granted. Be safe going home. Have an awesome holiday season if you celebrate such things. And turn of the year, take care of each other. We'll see you next year.
Yeah. It's like that thing in a movie where and it was oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. Hey, hang on. Before you leave, I forgot because I was the only person up here and I was not operating a live stream. My mother popped into the chat, y'all. In like 1971, she had a 575 haiku published at Vanderbilt University, and it goes like this. Are you ready? If I were taller, which I'll never be, I'd see the top of your head. Thanks, Mom.
You were advocating our behalf. Yeah, I mean, it's more about what I would say that generally we don't have lines Stop.
I was solo tonight, so nobody was checking comments.
Well, I mean,